General Motors has taken a lot of heat for faulty ignition switches in the Chevrolet Cobalt. What that experience can teach other companies about best practices in risk avoidance and defect assessment. That's today on Liability Watch. Welcome to Liability Watch. I'm Shelby Neal. GM used an ignition switch on certain cars that didn't meet its own specifications for torque, the amount of effort required to turn the key. That meant that a nudge of a keychain or driving over rough terrain could turn the car off. This also would disable the airbags. The ignition switch has been implicated in at least 54 frontal impact crashes in which the airbags did not deploy. It took GM over 11 years to identify the source of the problem, resulting in a massive recall, congressional hearings, and lawsuits. What does GM's experience tell other manufacturers about how to identify potential product defects and how to react quickly when an issue arises? Today we will hear from Chip Magid, a product liability attorney at Dorsey & Whitney, LLP. He'll discuss what can be learned from GM's experience. Chip?
Thanks, Shelby. GM's experience is dramatic and highly publicized, but it's not unique. Any company is susceptible to blind spots. The point is not to criticize GM, but rather to take away important lessons that are pertinent to all manufacturers. First, check all of your assumptions at the door. GM had teams of engineers looking at ignition switch problems, but couldn't make the connection to airbag non-deployment for over a decade. Why? From the beginning, GM believed that faulty ignition switches were merely customer convenience issues and not safety issues. Even though the ignition switch could turn the car off, GM reasoned that customers could still steer the car to safety. They never considered that, in turning off the car, the airbags would be disabled. When you're investigating a problem, everything has to be on the table, and everything has to be examined. Conduct a complete failure analysis, looking at all of the conceivable consequences without categorizing the analysis as important or unimportant. Second, put someone in charge. GM had all kinds of committees with engineers, product managers, and lawyers, all looking at the ignition switch problem. But none of the committees had ultimate authority or ownership of the problem. As a result, the issue passed from committee to committee without resolution for more than 11 years, and without anyone really putting a fresh set of eyes on the problem. As with anything in business, if you want results, put someone in charge and make them accountable, and give them a deadline. Third, make sure you take care of the basic blocking and tackling. For more than a decade, GM was unable to figure out why airbag deployment stopped in model year 2008 Cobalts. It turns out that there had been an undocumented change to the switch that increased the amount of torque required to turn the switch. GM noticed that the non-deployments did not occur in later model years, but couldn't figure out why. If they had disassembled the ignition switch in 2008 model cars and the switch in earlier models, the solution would have been obvious. That's exactly what a retained expert in a lawsuit against GM did, which is when the issue really became public, with huge financial and reputational consequences. Finally, create a culture of safety and show that you mean it. It's trite, I know. Everybody talks about a culture of safety. But a culture had developed at GM that led people not to raise issues with their superiors and to avoid identifying problems in writing for fear of creating documents that would come back to haunt them in a lawsuit. The senior leadership of a manufacturer needs to give more than lip service to a culture of safety. There has to be real emphasis on getting it right and a clear statement that all potential safety issues need to be raised with senior leadership as soon as possible. There also needs to be training that makes clear that avoiding ill-considered documents does not mean that safety issues should never be in writing. Identifying product defects and addressing them promptly is a challenge for any organization. But with a safety audit and the appropriate programs, the risk of overlooking a defect can be greatly reduced.
Thanks, Chip. To request a copy of Dorsey & Whitney's no-cost product safety checklist, follow the link on the screen. If you'd like more information of Dorsey's safety audit and litigation prevention solutions, contact Chip or visit dorsey.com. I'm Shelby Neal for Liability Watch. Thanks for watching.